Today you can create your own small reversible project from start to finish, so you can learn how to knit, practice basic knitting skills, learn new skills, and make a coaster you can use. I've created this series of standalone videos so you can learn the ABCs of knitting, and especially reversible knitting. All you need is cotton yarn size 4 in any color you like, and a pair of 4.5mm knitting needles. A large-eyed needle will be used to work in the ends. I'll demonstrate each step clearly and slowly, so let's get started. The cast-on I've chosen for this project is called the long-tail cast-on. It's the most commonly used by knitters. To start, leave about a 50 to 60 centimeter tail. The short end of the yarn is toward you. Put the needle under the yarn. Hold it with your right thumb or finger. Grab both ends in your left fist with your thumb up. Open your thumb and forefinger, pinch them together and slide them between the two yarn ends and open them wide. Now turn your left hand up and the right hand pulls the yarn down in a V. Slide the needle under the first bar, up the left thumb. Over the second bar, pick up the third bar, scooping from the top and back out the front, under the first bar. And let the yarn slide off your left thumb, inserting it back between the yarn ends and pull gently to tighten. One more time. Hold the two stitches on the right needle, left hand back, right hand down, right needle up the left thumb, under the first bar, over the second bar, down the forefinger, scooping the yarn back out the front. Release the yarn on the left thumb and insert it between the yarn ends and pull gently to tighten. Cast on 17 stitches this way. You can also make a big coaster with 23 stitches, or any odd multiple of 3 stitches plus 2 selvedge. For this project and this yarn, I've suggested using 4.5mm needles. Depending on how you knit, you can go up or down 0.5 millimeter if you find it's too loose or too tight, to 5 or 4. There are lots of different types of needles. Straight needles versus circular needles. My preference is circular needles because they're a little bit smaller and I'll never lose the other side. The first row is knit across. Set up the working yarn and tension. The simpler the better. I'm a continental knitter, so I hold my yarn like this. Try to set up your yarn consistently at first until it feels more familiar. Move the needle with the stitches to the left hand, making sure the yarn is at the back. Slide the stitches closer to the tip of the needle. The first row is knit across. Insert the right needle into the first stitch from the left. Yarn up and over the right needle. Pick the yarn out through the old stitch. Push the right needle through. Move the right needle to the right to let the old stitch drop off. Let's do that again. Needle in from the left, yarn up and over, pick out the yarn, push the needle through, and drop the old stitch off the left needle. Work each stitch the same for all the stitches. Knitting is sort of like driving. There's lots to pay attention to. But after a while, muscle memory takes over, especially for the repetitive parts. You can use the right hand needle to size each new stitch to get an even gauge. Turn your work, making sure that the yarn is at the back. Set up your working yarn and tension. This time, we'll slip the first stitch to get a nice selvedge. This is the most common selvedge for reversible projects. With the yarn in front of the right needle, insert the needle from the right to the left and transfer it without working it. Move the yarn to the back. Now knit the rest of the stitches, just like before. For any stitch pattern where you work each row the same, it's naturally reversible.
Before you turn your work, notice the knit stitches look like V's on the needle. Also notice how the stitches are mounted on the needles, with the stitch opening to the left and the right leg in front of the needle. All stitches should be mounted this way, and when you turn your work, they're still mounted this way. Notice the purl bump directly under the needle now. The purl stitch is the reverse of the knit stitch. For the next row, we're going to purl, so the stitches will look just like this on this side. Slip the selvedge like before, yarn in front, needle in from the right, transfer it to the right needle. This time, keep the yarn on the front for the purl stitch. Yarn in the front, insert the right needle from the right. Now wrap the yarn around the right needle, from the front, over the needle to the back. I find it helps to hold the yarn in place by pushing my left forefinger down the shaft of the right needle. Now push the yarn from the front to the back and push the needle through the new stitch. You can hold the new stitch on the right needle with your right forefinger and slide the old stitch off the left needle. Let's do that again. Yarn in the front, right needle in from the right, yarn up and over the back of the needle, push the yarn through the old stitch, push the needle through the new stitch, slide the old stitch off. Look at the new stitches and make sure they are mounted the same as before, opening to the left. If they're mounted opening to the right, then you may be wrapping the yarn around the needle in the opposite way. Keep purling for the whole row, except the last stitch. For the last stitch, move the yarn to the back and knit it. When you turn the work, notice that the other side of the purl stitch looks like a knit stitch. Now there are 2 knit-looking rows. Let's purl another row for practice. Remember to knit the last stitch for the selvedge for all rows. One great thing about most reversible stitches is that they lie flat. This is because there's a balance of knit-looking stitches and purl-looking stitches, and this causes the fabric to lie flat. Remember to knit the last stitch for the selvedge for all rows. On this side of the fabric, you can now see 2 rows of knit-looking stitches, one made on this side by working the knit stitch, and 1 row made on the other side by working a purl stitch. The most recent row is a purl-looking row made on this side by working purl stitches. As we turn the work, now they look like knit stitches. If you're brand new to knitting, you can continue to work the fundamental double garter stitch pattern for the whole project by knitting 2 rows and purling 2 rows until you're happy with the length of your coaster. Practice noticing how the knits and purls look on each side of the fabric so you stay in pattern. Skip to this timestamp to finish off your project with a cast-off that complements the cast-on, selvedges, and stitch pattern. If you're up for the next challenge, let's change it up a bit to the shifting garter stitch. For the next row, slip the selvedge purlwise with yarn in front, like before. Move the yarn to the back and knit 3 stitches. Now move the yarn to the front and purl 3 stitches. Continue alternating 3 knits and 3 purls to the last stitch. I chose this stitch pattern for the coaster project because it's a great way to practice knitting and purling, and also switching from knitting to purling and back again. Knit the selvedge stitch. Let's do that again. Turn the work. Slip the selvedge, knit 3, and purl 3. Since the purl stitch and knit stitch are the reverse of each other, with this stitch pattern, you always knit into the purl-looking stitches and purl into the knit-looking stitches. For the knit stitch, make sure to have the yarn in the back and pull the new stitch from the back to the front. For the purl stitch, have the yarn in the front and push the new stitch from the front to the back. I like the texture of the shifted garter. It's firm, so it's good for coasters. The selvedges are quite easy, and they finish the edges nicely. The cast on and the cast off for this project are the most common for knitters, and they all match. The shifting garter stitch pattern is worked the same on both sides of the fabric. And for any stitch pattern where you work each row the same, it's naturally reversible. Continue until your desired length. And end when you can see the purl bump row at the bottom. To match how we started, purl 2 rows like before, knitting the last stitch. And knit 1 row to match the beginning. As with the cast on and selvedge for this project, the passover cast off is the most common. Knit the first 2 stitches. And using the left needle, pull the right stitch up and over the left stitch and the end of the needle. Let's do that again. Knit a stitch, pull the right stitch over the left stitch. Keep going to the last 2 stitches on the left needle. This project is really flexible, so you can make a set of coasters that are all unique by using a variety of combinations of this simple stitch pattern of knit 2 rows and purl 2 rows, and the shifting garter of 3 knits and 3 purls. Just be careful that you don't just knit 1 row and purl just 1 row, because then the balance will be off and your fabric will curl. For more stitch patterns with only knits and purls, check out my playlist on easy reversible stitch patterns. If you're counting rows, remember that the purl bumps are on every other row. Technically, it's a 2-row repeat. You can see this clearly with the extra challenge at the end. Knit the last 2 stitches together to get a nice corner. Cut the yarn with a tail and carefully pull the tail through the remaining loop. Weave in the ends and you have a coaster. If you're up for a bit of an extra challenge, you can make a 2-color coaster by working 2 rows of the shifting garter stitch pattern for each color. The combination of the heavy stripes alternating with the lighter stripes makes a very interesting look.
If you've enjoyed knitting your awesome basic creation with me, please feel free to like this video and subscribe to my channel to find more videos on reversible stitch patterns and projects, including the other videos in this 5-part series. Each video showcases projects of various sizes and provides full instructions for a different cast-on, stitch pattern, special stitch combination, selvedge, and cast-off that all work together to make a beautiful reversible project. Feel free to leave a comment if you have questions or ideas for more awesome reversible knitting. And remember, knitting is a great way to create a unique gift for someone special.